and welcome to the LA Venture Podcast. This is Minnie Ingersoll, host of the podcast and partner at TenOneTen. TenOneTen is a seed stage fund here in LA. All opinions expressed on this show by me and my guests are solely our own. Phil Sanderson is one of the founders and managing director of Griffin Gaming Partners. Griffin is a $250 million fund investing in the global growth of gaming. Phil has been investing in gaming entrepreneurs for the past couple decades, with investments that include Discord, Thriller, Pandora, Phoenix Labs, and many others. At the end of last year, he ran a 240-mile race through the Moab Desert. Phil, I'm very excited to talk about gaming, and I also hope to save some time to ask you about what inspires you to run 240 miles through the desert. Thanks for being here.
That was a fun race. Took me 97 hours. I learned a lot about sleep strategy, since 4 of those 97 hours were sleeping, but I probably should have slept in the first 2.5 days rather than waiting for the third night to sleep, but that's another story. I think that sort of embodies sort of some of the ways I live my life, which is about challenging myself through physical and mental goals, and trying to achieve those goals, reinventing myself, and lifelong learning.
Yeah, but Phil, I was thinking about it, and I think 240 miles is like 9 marathons. It's more than 9 marathons. I mean,
it's hard for me to get my head around. Also is at it's at 10,000 feet altitude at times. It's 30 degrees at night, 85, 90 degrees during the day. It's so extreme. But I did a TEDx talk on hacking an ultra marathon, how it's compared to being an entrepreneur. It's about setting goals, having a great team, being flexible with the plans that you have, and adapting and having fun.
Yeah, you have some great TEDx talks, but 240 miles is really hard for me to get my head around. And let's start with Griffin and then circle back to your extreme life if we can.
Sure. We are a venture capital firm, as you mentioned, focused on gaming. It's in our name, Griffin Gaming Partners. We invest in early and late stage infrastructure and content companies in the gaming landscape all around the world. We're based in Santa Monica. We have an office in San Francisco as well. And gaming is the biggest consumer trend in the world. I've spent my entire career focused on game investing. About 10 years ago, there were probably 100 million people in the world who played games, electronic games. Today, it's over 3 billion. That's hard to get your head around, like a 240-mile race, but it's there. It's just a fact.
Right. So we all hear the stats. It's bigger than sports and movies combined, all of that. And that's just accelerating.
No, it's true. It's bigger than music, books, publishing. More people watch the League of Legends Championship than the NBA Finals by an order of magnitude.
An order of magnitude. It does say a lot about the future. So how does that guide your investments? I think you said you invest in infrastructure and content.
Yeah, one of the infrastructure investments I made kind of midway through my career was Discord. I invested in the seed round in 2012. And there's a core functionality that was needed for games to be able to communicate with the people you're playing with in a very robust, safe way in the game and outside of the game. And Discord really has solved that problem. You don't want to add somebody to your friend feed or your Facebook feed to be able to communicate with them with a short 5-minute game. You also want to be able to talk about that game in a community outside of the actual gameplay. And Discord has publicly said they've had over 250 million monthly active users. I mean, that's game changing. There are a lot of companies in the infrastructure category that are needed, and gaming is really at the forefront of a lot of innovation.
Tell me a little bit more about Discord, and how do you think about sort of the community aspect of what games are doing right now?
Well, the social component of games is a critical piece of the puzzle. People play because they want to spend time with their friends and to have fun. It's really a combination of the two. So a lot of that is within the game as you play. But so much of the enjoyment of games isn't necessarily even playing. It's sort of the background behind it, understanding what you're doing, the meta story, talking to your friends, forming a clan. And I should mention that Discord isn't used just within gaming. It's also replacing Slack within the enterprise in many cases as well, given its functionality.
Is it kind of audio Slack?
In many ways, it's video as well, but it's got a lot of the Slack functionality that you would expect, but it's free. So that's why it's just taken off versus Slack, which is a paid enterprise app.
So I think what you said is people play games because they're fun and because there's a community aspect to it.
Yes. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily put them in the order, but the fun factor has to be there. So many times everything makes sense on paper, but the game isn't that fun. When you've got a game that's really fun and social, it's usually a recipe for success.
And so do you play it yourself to figure out whether it's fun? Do you have like game testers whose job it is to see whether they're any fun?
Yes and yes. We play a lot of games at Griffin Gaming Partners, and it's sort of, we're one of those few people who get paid to play games. We do play every Friday as a team. We get together and play Mario Kart or Among Us or Super Smash Bros. We're a very data-driven firm too. So we sort through data from App Annie and PitchBook constantly, and we're looking at trends and research and seeing, on Steam, what's on the rise, what's increasing, what should we be paying attention to, and trying to get on those trends early. But it is important to really live and breathe and be of, by, and for the culture, which is what we are.
Yeah, it's a fun job. Great. And maybe just tell me a little bit about your team and who's who and how sort of that process works.
Sure. So just by way of background, I've been a venture capitalist for 25 years, focused on gaming, as I said, and I was a gaming banker before that at Robertson Stevens, and I went to business school along the way. And my two partners are Peter Levin and Nick Tuasso. Peter had worked at Lionsgate, lives in LA, has done more IP integration work than anybody in the industry.
Can you tell me a little bit about the IP integration work and how that usually flows, where the overlap is between Hollywood and gaming?
Sure. I mean, it's becoming stronger and stronger. We like games that have a strong IP that's either licensed or that they've created on their own. In the case of one that they've licensed, the customer acquisition cost can be lower because people know about that IP already, and then they end up paying in terms of a royalty or license on the back end, which is performance-based. Also, if you've created a piece of IP, then you can create books, TV, movies around it as well. I won't go into details on our limited partner base, but we've got about 17 of the world's largest media companies and game companies as LPs. So, we have companies that come to us and say, I would love to work with, just use an example, James Bond, right? Or somebody like that IP. We can make introductions to almost any IP in the world. So that could be a huge advantage for portfolio companies of ours.
So there's heavy overlap between gaming and Hollywood intellectual property. Is there also heavy overlap with storytelling, and do games borrow a lot of that DNA from Hollywood as well?
They do, and many games have professional SAG writers and so forth, and it is an important element. I do believe there's a trend in gaming to have artificial intelligence-based storytelling, which is much more scalable, as is AI-based graphics. We invested in a company called Latitude, which has a game called AI Dungeon, which is exactly in this area. Just to wrap up on your prior question, my third partner is Nick Tuasto, who is a banker at LionTree. LionTree is our third partner within the fund. It's a TMT investment bank, and it really, gives us great access to some of the broader M&A, knowledge base out there. So that piece of market intelligence is a critical component of what we do as well.
Are there easy things to summarize there in terms of, where M&A is happening and the broader trends sort of downstream?
I think so. So as I said, we do a lot of early stage and late stage investing. And you can see on our website, we've got some investments in companies like AppLovin and Skills and Discord and others. They're interested to know what their exit options are down the road, what companies they may want to buy and so forth, so we can advise them and help them along the way. I will say that there have been some great exits in general in the market recently. It's been a golden age for game companies for liquidity.
Well, good for you. Good place to be investing then.
It is.
And this is fund one for you guys, right?
It's our first fund, yes.
Ah, very exciting. Okay, so because this is LA Venture and we talk about sort of the overlap of LA and investing, how do you like, I saw that Google shut down Stadia or some of their own content development. How do you think tech and content play well together? Or do you think like a company that has tech as its DNA is not going to be able to create great content?
It's an insightful comment. Many tech companies in the past or gaming companies in the past have launched their services aligning themselves with a major piece of IP, like Microsoft, Xbox with Halo, right? Or Sony PlayStation with Spider-Man. Google has not been used to paying for content. It hasn't been in their DNA, and they chose not to do it, and they failed because of it. And so that marriage between Silicon Valley and Hollywood didn't work. So, I think if they were to take another pass at this, which they probably will, they may have a different strategy and really embrace the LA ecosystem. So, that's my take on Stadia, but I think cloud gaming will come around eventually. We're seeing different forms of it. And the infrastructure is out there, but you need more than just infrastructure, right? You need more than just the technology. You need the business models to really be paired in the right way. And I think that'll happen.
What is going on with business models today?
I mean, there's new and innovative ones all the time. One of the reasons why gaming has taken off so much in the last 10 years has not just been because of the new platforms, mobile phones and so forth, but also the business models of being free to play that allowed many, many users to play games. And even though typically only 3 to 5% pay for anything, that adds up to the, tens of billions of dollars that we see in in-app purchases and so forth. The battle royale mechanic that was really started with PUBG and Fortnite and so forth. That's a business model. It's only season passes for those things that have really taken off. And we'll see different forms of business models. The music scene has really, the business models that there have changed and are starting to change. And we're starting to see music within the metaverse. And that's fascinating, right? I mean, one of the real questions is, we know that live music will come back. I'm starting to see festivals start to get on the books for September and so forth. But will people move away from consuming music online permanently? Or are those patterns ingrained? And are we going to see that? I happen to think they are ingrained, and there will be a continued use of watching shows within Roblox, within Fortnite, and other platforms as well.
And what is it that's sort of most compelling within a metaverse to consume? Like, is it concerts? And I always hear about interactive, but they don't look all that interactive to me. So maybe you could just explain that better to me.
Sure. Audiences are aggregating within social media platforms and within games. That's just where people are today, right? In mass. Roblox, for example, has 30 million plus kids every day that show up. Over half of the US audience under 16 is on Roblox every day.
I didn't quite realize it was that huge.
It's incredible. So why not present, media experiences as well, just like within Fortnite. And by the way, there are other platforms that are even larger that you probably never heard of, like Free Fire by Garena, right? Okay, it's even bigger.
Right.
But these are places where people are aggregating. So today, there's a mix of 1.0 and 2.0 versions. Just showing a live stream is sort of a 1.0 version, and that's happening everywhere. And there's probably 50 live streaming companies out there today. But when you can show up with your avatar and your friends and watch an experience, it's actually, even more enhanced. And then we've invested in a company called Wave that I'm on the board of. And what you're doing is you're watching the avatar of a performer or a DJ or a singer perform, and you can interact with that performer. You can send them comments, and the comments appear on the stage. You can choose what song they want to play next. This is very common in the East with some big platforms like Bilibili and so forth, where you're interacting with that media. And it's fun. You really have that sort of live music feel while not having the exact feel.
Anything else really cool that you think about when you are looking at how these metaverses are, becoming sort of the sci-fi is being realized within the metaverse?
Non-fungible tokens, NFTs, are very cool. Obviously, it's the expression of the month. So within the metaverse, if you're watching a concert and there's a song that's played, to be able to buy that song within that show on that day and own it as a serial number and be able to trade it, that's happening.
What do you own? Do you own anything?
I do. I own a bunch of moments on NBA Top Shots, a bunch of LeBron dunks and Weissman dunks and Steph Curry three-pointers.
Cool. Those are fun things to own. So now we've got NFTs. We've got half the kids in the United States are like playing Roblox right now. What else are we going to be doing in the metaverse? I mean, are we going to be shopping in the metaverse?
Well, it started with people are playing games and they're having social interactions. And yeah, shopping is, look, e-commerce is big, and there's no reason why that won't take off. To have a store that you could browse and find products and have a more of a visual interactive Amazon, It's a great idea. I think you should start that company right now. I'll back you.
Okay, great. Okay, and so tell me more about, have you made any bets in esports, and how do you think that that's going to evolve? And did you say season passes also to the esports are a big thing or a growing thing?
That was within Epic, early on when they were selling season passes. We haven't made any investment in teams. Esports, the physical esports showing up at events has obviously been decimated during COVID, but esports has never been larger in terms of watching sports. So we've made a number of investments in the infrastructure and content companies in and around the esport area. People love to watch games. I mean, what is it? Something like 80 million people on Twitch every month watching games. It's fun. And it's not unlike watching sports on TV. Again, it's hard to get your head around if you're not a millennial necessarily. But once you start to watch people play, or people that play, either relatives, your kids, or people that are famous, you start to get into it and you start to realize it. But you have to keep it open mind in our business, because it's just the pace of innovation is massive.
Yeah. People come around to it. It just sometimes it takes a little while. The other thing I hear a lot is like, oh, I don't want to invest in games. They're very hit driven.
Right.
How do you combat that?
Well, I do like that expression because it keeps our industry less competitive, because it's just not true. I mean, in general, there is a small component of gaming which is hit driven, like investing in an indie movie title, having it go to Sundance and hoping it gets big. Those do happen. And I will say, like, there have been some good examples of that. Like, I think Candy Crush was their 30-something try at a game, and all of a sudden became like one of the biggest games of all time. That's not what we do. And there's a little bit more of that on the casual, hyper casual side versus the active casual, mid-core, hardcore style games. But when we invest in an early stage company, many times it's based on just an incredible team. Like, they've made money in gaming before. They've made money within a large, enterprise, and they're just so talented. We're just going to back them pre-PowerPoint. In other early stage cases, they have a beta of a product that's out. You can get a mobile game out in 9 months, and even without all the monetization features, you can get it out in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, a micro market versus US and Europe that's also English speaking. So it's a good proxy for those larger markets. And you can look at all the metrics that matter: the CAC to LTV ratio, the average revenue per daily active user, or ARPDAUs, the retention rates based on day 1, day 15, day 30. We know what these retention rates should be per the game category and class. So if these metrics with a large sample set prove themselves out, we kind of know already that this game will be successful. This is not throwing darts at a dartboard.
So when let's say you're doing an early investment and it's a great team that's coming out of somewhere, do you have certain places where you just know are always producing great people?
Yeah, I mean, there's not just certain companies, but certain geographies. So there's a lot of interesting talent coming out of Turkey right now, out of Israel. And a lot of these come from some of the major companies. Like, we've backed teams out of Peak Games or in Turkey, or Playtika in Israel, and places like this. So after there's an acquisition, a lot of times people leave, and we'll look for some of the key participants there.
Yeah. The other thing that I hear sometimes, or maybe I used to hear it more, was like working at like a game development company or working at some of these, it didn't pay as well. It was like harder. Is that still true? Is there a reputation there?
Well, there definitely was a reputation that you're paid more in sort of the satisfaction than the monetary pieces. Mm-hmm. I think rising tides have risen all boats, and certainly equity has done well for most companies, just because game companies have done so well. So it used to be more of a labor of love, and I think it's less so that. It's more of a professionalized industry.
Okay, cool. Anything else big on gaming? Because I do want to save a little time to ask about your 9 marathon running in one race.
Yeah. I think we covered a lot of gaming. Look, I think it's becoming what I call the new enterprise software. There's just so many exits. I don't think people realize, and in the public markets, but they will, that a lot of gaming is predictable, right? Because these cohorts are lasting for months, years, and decades. And when people value the CAC, customer acquisition cost, to LTV, lifetime value, that ratio, in most cases are saying, well, if a user stays for 2 years or maybe 3, but the reality is, once you produce great content and you keep producing content, that consumer will stay with you in many cases for 10 years. And you've got these cohorts that go down over time, right? Because there's erosion. But in many cases, when someone pays after 30 days, they're staying with you for years. So it's a predictable business model, and in many cases, much more cost efficient than enterprise software because you pay a little bit less upfront. Once you have that CAC to LTV ratio working, then you can start spending hundreds of thousands, millions, or tens of millions a month on customer acquisition. If your payback is going to be in 9 months and you keep them for years, that's a great model.
I don't totally understand, why do they stay with you? Like, I understand they might roll off one game, but aren't they equally likely to choose another game that was developed by someone else?
Yeah, but I mean, how many people do you know have been playing Candy Crush for like 5 years? And they don't play it all the time, but they play it like once or twice a week, right?
Yeah.
It's so comfortable for them. It's easy, it's fun. They know it, they're good at it. Plus, they built up a character, they built up all this stuff. They don't want to just give it up. It's sticky. And then if you keep coming out with new levels, new content, new innovation, it's sort of like a different game. It, they call it games as a service. It's like reading a book series that comes out with a new book and you want to read the next book. It's kind of like the same thing.
I know retention must vary widely depending on sort of what platform we're talking about, but like within mobile, say, can you break down sort of retention numbers that you might be looking for?
I could. Somewhat proprietary.
Fair enough. You can pass.
Yeah, I'll pass on that question because it's very detailed. I mean, there's different levels of games. I mentioned hyper casual, casual, active casual, and there's, sort of mid-core and hardcore, and there's different retention rates for all of them. In most cases, when we talk to portfolio companies or prospects, we don't focus on the monetization yet. Retention is more important. We really want to see that people love the game. Again, the fun factor. And if they can stay, then you can start to monetize them with pretty traditional means of monetization.
Right. Okay. So maybe it related to the retention, which is kind of that knowledge that you've built up over decades of doing this and tracking the data. Is that why you think VCs sort of fail to cut into gaming if they're not focused on gaming? Because a lot of what you talk about, it's the new enterprise SaaS, it's CAC to LTV ratios. It's things that most VCs are probably very comfortable looking at.
I think most VCs in gaming are more comfortable in the later stage investing because it's much more metric driven. There's a lot of revenue, there's EBITDA, or there's a pattern, there's margins they can understand. But when it comes to earlier stage, it's hard.
I'd say some of the infrastructure stuff feels more approachable to me. Like if you were doing something that was broadly, related to GPUs in the cloud that you might do for something else that you also could apply to gaming, might feel like where traditional VCs might overlap.
See, that might be the Google in you saying that.
Oh, it totally is. It totally is. That's a good
and it's not to say the content side is more of an art form, but there are certain patterns that are very, very metric based within content companies and so forth. And those are very easy to identify and trace.
Okay, Phil, what about we start talking about running, 240-mile races through the desert? Can we switch over to that?
Sure. So I've only done one 240-mile race. I have done over 100. I've done 100 ultras of 50K or over. I've done 22 100-mile races, which is more the distance I'm comfortable with, which is still really tough. Every year I do the Grand Slam Ultra Series. This will be my 5th year doing it, which is the 4 original 100-mile races in the US. They're all about 3 to 5 weeks apart, which makes it really hard. And they're all in extreme conditions, but I love it. I mean, I just, actually one of the hardest things that I do is keeping a quota for myself and running 70 miles a week. And if I miss a day, I have to run 20 miles a different day of the week. And it's often hard, but I made a commitment to myself and I've got a goal. I'm going to do it.
Well, I appreciate having goals, but I'm always, for me, I'm always worried that I set the wrong goals or something. Like, why did you decide? Sorry, that sounded wrong.
No, it's a good point. I don't think it sort of escalated over time. I didn't just jump into it. I've been running, I ran cross country and track in high school and college. And then I guess my tolerance increased. And I don't know, I just needed something that was even a heightened goal. Mm-hmm. And again, I say that in all seriousness, like my tolerance did increase, not necessarily for pain, but just for achievement and trying to try new things. One of the great things about doing that 240-mile race, it was a new experience for me in a sport that I've done my entire career. So that was really fun.
I mean, that trend of sort of doing something more and more extreme, does that play out for you in other realms of your life? Like, is that just who you are?
I think so. I mean, I have channeled a lot of my extreme focus towards athletics. A lot of people have, and it doesn't have to be athletics. People can do it in different areas. And I do like competition. and I have been in situations where I've told people at the end of the race, like, it was really fun to run with you, but also to compete with you because it brought the best out in me, and that's kind of why I do it. I mean, there was a race 2 years ago in the Vermont 100, and there was a guy I was running back and forth with for 60 miles. He didn't want to run together. He just wanted to run alone. And he was better, faster, cheaper. Like, he was younger, stronger, faster by far. And I was with him at mile 91. And it was in Vermont, a super hot year. So it was 90 degrees during the day and 95% humidity. And I was hurting so bad. And I said to myself, okay, if I'm with him, like with 5 miles to go, he's going to win. He's going to beat me. So I have to make my move now. And it hurt so much. And I was running like literally sub 8-minute miles, maybe 7:45s at night. And I made my move, and it was like but I said to myself, if I don't do it now, I'm going to feel bad for like 3 months. And so it's like, if I don't like put in an effort the next 20 minutes, I can feel bad for 3 months. Like, that's a pretty good risk return ratio. Like, I don't want to feel bad. Like, that was my motivating, factor. And I just went as hard as I could. And I came in 5th overall, which was like crazy because it was my third race within, third 100 miler within 8 weeks. And it was like, I felt good about that literally for a year. Like, it made me feel good for a year.
That's awesome. Okay. My summary then is that you've got this amazing drive and energy. And so you've got to funnel it towards productive endeavors, like That's being right. in shape and investing.
Yeah. It's the same with investing. It's true. I mean, I put everything into it. I mean, my partners and I are 24/7. We love what we do, and we're like tireless. I'll give you another example here. There was a company in Europe that we were trying to invest in. It was super competitive. The CEO said, we're not taking any meetings now. And I checked my phone on a Sunday morning at 4 a.m. My partner, Peter, had texted me like right before that, and said, the CEO said he'd see us. And I just did a quick search on Orbitz, and I'm like, there's a flight later today. The 3 of us were on a flight that afternoon on Sunday flying to Europe. We're taking the same, sort of style of competitiveness and endurance to being a VC.
It is. It's competitive, and you get a high from it for sure.
Yeah, well, everyone likes to win. And I think we define winning as finding great entrepreneurs and being part of their success. It's so fun. That's why we do this, right?
Yep. Yeah. Also, we are going to run out of time, but I loved your TED Talks. Both, I listened to fasting, voice fasting, and food fasting. Can you give the quick version of those?
Sure. I'd say I'm not an expert in fasting, but this TED Talk on food fast, it definitely resonated. I think 1.5 million people have watched it. I think, like I said, you put your life in perspective when you take out a basic human need like air, water, food, or shelter. So when you take out food, in this case, I just limited it to 600 calories a day for a week. It was a mental challenge. It was like running a 100-mile race. And I learned a lot about my body, about goal setting, about people. The voice fasting was interesting too, just not being able to talk for a week and being able to communicate. And I learned a lot about communication. In both cases, I had the best sleep of my life. It's very peaceful, especially when you're that in tune with your body and your metabolism. And so, yeah, check out this TED Talks.
Yeah, I think you said about the voice fast, sort of you reevaluate how communication is done, or like the use of words.
It's true. There's a lot of nonverbal communication. People talk less. It's quieter. It does stimulate your amygdala in your brain by hearing less words. Most people speak 15 to 25,000 words a day. That's a lot. And that means you listen to that many when you're interacting with people. But people are a lot more efficient in their communication with you when there are no words. One of the things I was impressed with early in my career was hearing, I think Bill Gates say, in every memo that happens within Microsoft, you have to say what you really want to say in the first sentence, and then everything else you can write, but just put that point in the first sentence. And that's smart.
Yeah.
I believe that.
It turns out making a weekly podcast and you have to listen to yourself communicate, you learn a lot about communication.
It's true. It's very true.
Anything else that we should get about you, Phil, or I could let you go back to your investing life?
Look, the LA ecosystem has just been so vibrant in the last 10 years, especially, in gaming. So we're doing so much in the area. We'd love to meet with bright, innovative entrepreneurs who have got good ideas.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, Phil, thanks for coming on the pod. I look forward to following Griffin's success.